Hello and welcome to another episode of You're in America channel. I'm your host, Senait, and today I'm truly honored to welcome a very special guest, someone who once held space for me to share my story and whose work continues to impact so many around the world. Sundae Bean is an intercultural strategist, transformational facilitator, and the host of the globally recognized podcast In Transit. With years of experience supporting individuals and organizations through change, Sundae has an incredible gift for guiding people through transitions with purpose, clarity, and compassion. Today, we are flipping the script. I get to interview Sundae about a topic close to both of our hearts: navigating identity, purpose, and belonging as expats and immigrants. We'll explore the difference between these identities, emotional toll of cultural transitions, and how we can all contribute meaningfully to the communities we call home. Whether you are currently in transition, supporting someone who is, or simply curious about the layers of global living, this conversation will open your heart and mind. Let's dive in. Sundae, thank you so much for being here.
I am so honored that you asked me.
I've been waiting for this moment, and you have inspired me over the years. And I really enjoyed our time together last time when you interviewed me. So let's turn the tape.
Yeah, interesting. I'll try not to go into interview mode when we're talking today.
No problem. Anything is possible in this. Last time, you said something interesting to me. That is also what I believe, that we are always in transition. It's not just when we move to another country, but we are constantly in transition. So why don't we start by you telling me where you are in your transition?
Yeah, great. I was actually thinking about that this morning. Last time you and I spoke, I was in South Africa. At the time, I don't think I knew I was going to repatriate to Switzerland. At that time, I was 100% convinced I would never do anything else but work full-time for my own company, right? And I had some challenges that were quite on my heart, on the personal realm, that I also didn't know that they would shift on the other side. But now, since we've spoken, I have moved from South Africa to Switzerland. I have kept my company, but really put things to a very micro level so I could focus on an organizational transformation. Those personal things that on my heart have lightened and loosened and shifted in ways that I only had hoped for. We bought a house in Switzerland. That means we committed ourselves to a level of stability that we haven't had as a globally mobile family. And probably the hardest transition is that I'm going through perimenopause. I'm in my late 40s and my hormones went through a transition from South Africa to Switzerland. You too, oh my gosh. And I have had to dig so deep in my resilience, things that I've gone through, other transitions, other uncertainty, other physical challenges. I've had to dig deep and use them for this very natural transition, but very challenging. So yeah, there's quite a few things happening. I also now have two teenagers. At the time I had, some middle schoolers. So pick it. I mean, which transition should we dive into today?
I could totally relate on so many levels, not the raising teenagers. That when I get there, I'll ask you. I'm going to ask a lot of support around that, but you mentioned about premenopause, and I don't even know why, people don't talk about that. Nowadays, I hear talking about it, and that is helpful, but it's really wonderful to see that you are able to transition, but at the same time, you have a lot under your belt for this, but it doesn't make it easy. It doesn't make it easy, right? And not just us, the entire planet seems to be going through some kind of transition in a collective level as well. So, yeah.
And maybe connected to, the topic that you often bring up. When we spoke, I was a rotational expat, right? And now I've repatriated to the country where I'm a naturalized citizen, right? And used to be an immigrant, but now because I'm also Swiss, but I still have a US passport. So there's been things that have gone on also from an identity perspective that have happened, which kind of created a situation where I had to reassess or relook at things that I had actually left 9 years ago when we left Switzerland and started to be more mobile, right? So there's a lot going on.
Oh, wow. And I would love to hear more about that. And since our topic is expat and immigrants experience, so why don't we start off with what's the difference between those two words, being an immigrant and being an expat, especially in the US, but also in a global world. And since you had both experiences, so what is the difference?
Well, I'm a little bit of a purist that every immigrant is an expat, because the definition of expat is simply being outside of your country of origin, right? So in my mind, everybody who lives outside the country of origin is an expat. Unfortunately, because of power dynamics, historical context, it's like there's some people who have the privilege of calling themselves expats and others who are referred to as immigrants, right? That's a huge topic, and I'm sure your listeners are very aware of the dynamics that are, connected to that. But what is different when we take, I would say, a rotational expat, that when I look at that, meaning someone is there temporary, that's like a chapter of your life. So I lived in West Africa. That was a beautiful chapter of my life. I lived in South Africa, a chapter of my life. But when you're an immigrant, you've legally migrated into a place and your intention is to stay. This is like a new beginning, right? It's not just a chapter. And the stakes are really high, because if let's say I didn't love my time in West Africa, then we would say, oh, we only have a few more years and we can go. But when you've immigrated, whether you're a love pat and you move because of, stay with your partner, or you've been forced out of your country because of war or some other reason, you have to create a life that you love where you are. And you might not even have a choice on what cultural context is around you, right? So, with an expat, if you're a rotational expat, you get to say, do I want to go to Ulaanbaatar or Ouagadougou, right? Like you might have a choice in some cases, but immigration might not be a choice. And in some cases it is a choice, but it doesn't mean you've wanted to leave something. You might have said, when I look at all of my values and all of the ramifications that's going on politically, this is the best thing for me or my family, or this is what we have to do, right? So I think, for me, my heritage from immigration from Norway into the United States, and there were a lot of things that had to be left behind, painful things like letters in our family of, my great-grandfather writing a letter of goodbye to his mother. Wrench out your heart type of context. But I also think behind everybody who's gone through that story, there's resilience, there's adaptability, there's strength there that is, I can't even talk about it without being moved by it emotionally, right? So I think they're very different when you put them in context, right?
Right. And I love that. I love the way you're defining it, but also your perspective, because it's not just on paper, but it's a lived experience for you. So there's a difference when you read it and when you actually lived it. You know exactly what it means. Yeah. And I want to ask you how the US system shaped how expats and immigrants experience life differently. And for this, I was thinking of your quote, and I have to read this. Your past is not your potential. In any hour, you can choose to liberate the future. I love that quote, and it really speaks to the power of, rewriting one's story across cultures. Did you reflect on that in this context?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting time to have this conversation, right? If we had had this conversation even 2 years ago, I think it would take a different tone. But right now, at least what I see is we're really in a time of polarization in the United States. We've had this gorgeous wave of, Black Lives Matter and rise of Pride Month, and there was so much space that was being occupied. And now it feels like that space is getting smaller again. So an expansion and a contraction. And right now, what I think is really unique about the US context is that, if we say expat, if we're going to use that language where people are going to ascribe that identity to people, not that they are that, it's that's given them. My guess that people within the US context would see people on corporate assignment are expats, and they're going to have more nuance in them. They'll probably ask, oh, why are you here? Where do you work? What brought you here? Do you miss home? Right? And unfortunately, this idea of immigration is, on one hand, the foundation of the pride of the United States, unfortunately at the expense of the Native American community that actually was there before immigrants came. That's another topic. But there is a narrative, at least how I grew up with it, we're built on immigration, right? And right now I see a similar narrative of migration or immigration is a threat to the United States, which in my perspective, very confusing, because we're built as a land of immigrants, but now immigration is a threat, right? So that's very complex. So when I think of, where I grew up in the Midwest, relatively culturally isolated, right? People consume, we had, 2.5 channels growing up. So you watch ABC or NBC, and then there was Channel 4 that only had public things from time to time. Now we have more access, but people are still relatively isolated in the media they select, right? So I think people who are having an immigration background coming from abroad into the US, especially people of color, have so much more to hold, right? If you're white, you can maybe pass, and maybe they see, oh, you're German, I have German in my heritage, right? You have an easier access. But I think that there's a lot of our social and cultural history of power and identity struggles that, unfortunately, people who are in the US context have to bring whatever they have from where they've come from and hold something that they haven't even been historically part of, right? I don't know, does that resonate with you? I mean,
It does. Yeah. And I see a lot of confusion here too. Like one of my happy moments, I don't know if I mentioned this when we had the interview last time, one of my pride being here is the way we naturalize, for example, and when I took the oath to become an American and to look around the room and see different people from different parts of the world becoming one in becoming a citizen. And I cried when I did the oath. And I used to love going to naturalize, like my friends or family, and every time I actually would have tears because it's such a beautiful thing. However, right now it's very confusing, and everybody's on the same boat trying to figure out what that is. I've had both experience as well, like being an expat in China and then being an immigrant here. We know that they're just levels, but I insist I don't call myself expat, so that I want people to know what immigrants mean, because I really, even though the word immigrants is the problem, but I don't see it that way, and I don't think I can ever see it that way. And I sometimes talk to my husband. He came for work, so he identifies as an expat, and I say, no, now you're an American, so you're an immigrant, okay? And he's like, I
think about a story that I had years back when I was in Switzerland. So born and raised in the US, but then kept my US citizenship and also added Swiss citizenship. And I remember early days before, when I only had a visa to stay here. I remember being in a social situation and people would switch. When I spoke German, they would switch to English because they could hear my accent. And either they're used to switching languages, or they're being kind, or they wanted to practice their English. But in any case, I remember coming home and going, they don't understand, right? They speak English because they learned it in school and they like to speak English. I have to speak German. My mother-in-law only speaks German. If I want to go to the dentist or the gynecologist, or if I'm in an emergency, I need German. And I remember thinking how different it is. When you're at a place for a temporary time, you can hold that, right? But when you're like literally married to the country, it's like the stakes are higher. And I don't know about you, but I've been abroad for over 25 years. In terms of identity, one classic of immigrants is your identity. You merge parts of your local environment into who you are, and who you were 25 years ago isn't who you are now. And so if someone were to call me Sunday's American, I would feel like all of my global experience is completely erased, right? And if you're like me, there are parts of me that really embrace locally, and it's very much part of my identity. And then you feel like people don't see what's similar. They only look at what's different. And I think that's really hard. And that's one of the things that I try to do with my work as an interculturalist is how do we always focus on both, right? And I'm guilty of it. I can polarize, I can think about how we're different, and I can also erase differences and think about how we're similar, right? And I think that's our job, is to try to hold both, right? And if from my experience, what I try to do to mitigate that is, for example, I'm self-conscious when people hear me speak, they automatically hear my American accent. And I want them to not put me in one box. I want them to know I have other boxes, right? So in an introduction, I might say, well, what you hear right away is my accent. I'm from North Dakota. But what you might not hear is that I've spent 9 years in West and South Africa. And I am Swiss and have 2 Swiss kids, right? So I try to take the box that they might see and expand it into more of who I am. And then now they have more to talk to me about, right? Maybe they have South Africa, maybe they have boys, maybe, right? I don't know. Do you feel like you do that as well?
Yes. We do that as we are human, right? We're all guilty of, we hear someone speak and then, we judge them by their cover. Unfortunately, that's human nature, and that's okay. But yes, I have to tell people, the context. Sometimes you might not have that opportunity, but if I have some control of the situation, or I would have slipped, some things in, so that they, and once they put you in a box, then it's hard on the person that's putting you on the box as well, if you don't give all that context. Okay, I also traveled before. You might hear me, speak my language, for example, but I also speak English and I speak another, you have to give that context, and it's hard not to polarize, but we need to educate ourselves,
Taking charge of the story, and that goes back to the quote that you mentioned. It's, I am going to take charge of the story about who I am, right? We're writing a story right now, and I'm adding to the story by giving you more details. And I don't want anybody to feel like a victim, where people are putting you into stories. We get to write our story. And it could be the introduction, it could be, our first few days at work, whatever it is. Where can people take charge of their story?
I think you are touching on something that we have talked about in our last interview when we were talking about rebuilding. And I was very surprised, you telling me where you're from, and then I'm telling you where I'm from 2 different continents. That, with different experience, we grew up in a different context. But then again, after that, when we came together, it was very surprising how much in common we have, and so many things to talk about. Once you take that box away, it becomes about discovering you and me, and what our similarities are. And the difference, I can learn from you, you can inspire me, right? And I told you earlier, I've been inspired by your work for a long time, because I can learn from you as you can, because our experiences are similar, but then again, different. So it's just, I love how you weaving that and then triggering a memory, what we talked about last time. And you have touched on it, but what are a few ways people can move with intention and stay grounded during cultural transitions? We were talking about it a little bit, but
what makes me want to connect a little bit to how you inspire me. The work you've done inspires me because it's so deeply, intentionally dedicated to community, right? When I look at everybody you've interviewed, the topics that you've covered, like it is so clear your intentions is community centered. At least that's how I see it from the outside, right? And when you talk about moving with intention, I think through transition, I think people need to keep in mind that resilience is built in community, right? And that we don't do it alone. We have to do it ourselves. So that's one thing I think when I would suggest, and I think you've been a great model for that on inspiring and helping people have resources and access leaders in the community. So I think that would be the first thing I would say is when you are in transition, bring people on your journey, right? Invite people in. And I have to be very honest, I'm guilty of a few times in my life where I've gone through something hard. And I think it's a shame reflex. I would do it. I would suffer in silence, right? Like I wouldn't talk to people. My friends would call, how are you? I'm fine. And inside I'm like grappling with something really big. And I say that having done it wrong. I've also done hard things with the support of community, right? I've tried both strategies, and I wouldn't one. So that's one. And then honestly, I mean, it goes back to my work on the intercultural pendulum. We call it anchors. You know, when you are in transition, everything is changing. You know, think about South Africa, our seasons changed, weather changed, resources changed. Like Switzerland is so expensive. You know, we didn't have as much help. Our kids changed schools, their academics changed. My husband changed jobs. I changed things professionally. But what stays the same? Like what can be our anchors? And for us, like we have Pizza Friday, like it's religion, you know, Taco Tuesday, you know, what do we do? And one of the things that I'm still working on is, and the advice I give to people is, you know, what are the things that make you feel whole and make you feel grounded? Maybe you don't get to do the exact same thing, but you keep the intention. Like for me, physical activity is important. Running was really important. The weather is terrible in the winter, dark and cold and rainy. Okay, I'm not going to run in the morning like that. But what can I do instead? Right? So maybe I run at lunch by the river when I'm at work and I don't have to help with my kids' lunch, right? So trying to, when things aren't working because they used to work how they did wherever you were before and now they're not working, try to go back a step and go, what is it that I'm trying to achieve, right? I want to move my body. I want to have family time. I want nourishing food. Like, so that I think, I mean, I'm just speaking from my own experience, notice with a lot of people who've moved away from home, we can get into, but back home, food is better. People are nicer. People are warmer. People are, you know, it's like everything's better there. And here is harder or less, right? It's easy to get into that place, right? Instead going, okay, what did I love about that? How can I bring some of that here? How can I reinvent some of that here? And then the next step would be, well, what's pretty awesome about here that I didn't have there? So for example, in Switzerland, my kids can, I mean, a 12-year-old can go on a train into the city center, go grab food and come back on their own. In South Africa, I would never do that. I would never say, go by yourself to Joburg and come back. You know what I mean? So I have to consciously also balance the good things. So that's some of those things. And then the other thing, honestly, is it's really basics. Like, are you sleeping enough? Are you feeding your body good enough food? Are you monitoring alcohol and caffeine? Are you doing any like spiritual or religious practice or something that lightens your heart? I mean, it's pretty simple. It doesn't mean it's easy.
Yeah, especially, I mean, after living in South Africa for so long with the sunshine, how do you bring the sunshine to Switzerland? It would be hard, but you have to embrace what is good.
Yep. It's also not like gaslighting yourself, right? Like, you do have to grieve and say, God, it's really crappy weather for 4 or 5 months, and man, I miss it's nice. But what we did do, for example, it was my husband's 50th birthday, and we said, okay, for your 50th birthday, we're going to go back to the sun for your birthday, right? So how can I, how can I build in some of that and find a little taste of that?
That's beautiful. I hear you say something very beautiful underneath what we're talking about. This is not part of my questions, but I'm hearing the topic of home. So I have to ask this question. So what is home to you? Since you have moved around so much, what is home?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's a really important question for all of us, right? Who have had to reinvent home, right? So I used to have an answer where I would say North Dakota is my womb home, like the place I was born. Where I was living at the time was my current home, and Switzerland was my second home, right? That's what I used to say. But now I'm in Switzerland. I call South Africa my former home, right? Because it's still home, but it's not there now. For me, honestly, home is like being with a community of people that get me, or you know what I mean? Like, you're weird like me.
Yeah, weird is a good thing. Yeah, in our dictionary.
You're my flavor of weird, where I'm different around them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, we're all a little mixed up culturally or whatever is going on, and that I think home for me is definitely my nuclear family, and my nuclear family and the nuclear family I've created, right? My mom and my dad, sister, brother, and then now my boys and my husband, that's home. Yeah. So I think it's more about relationships, to be honest.
Yeah. It reminds me of the quote, home is where your heart is. I think that's what they had in mind. At least I hope that's what they mean. And let's move on to community building. And since you have so much experience in moving around, and you had to rebuild your life over and over, and I know the pain of that, and it's also about shedding your skin, and there's just so much adjustment. A lot of people don't realize if they have not gone through that experience, or if they had gone through that experience. We don't talk about the pain and all, but you've done that way too many times. And you have to build community around you. Like you said, that's home, right? Yeah, you have to literally make a home around you, like with a community. So what advice do you have for building authentic, supportive community in a new country?
Yeah, I think I learned this advice by working with, my own experience, but also watching people struggle in places that aren't instant community makers, right? So, for example, if you are in a globally mobile context and you go to an international school, people are in the same situation, they organize around each other, and it's pretty fast to get community. But not everybody gets that situation, right? I know when we moved back here, the kids at my son's school had been together for 7 years, and they'd never had like a new outsider. So the teachers didn't know how to welcome someone new. The kids didn't have it on their radar because they've never had to learn that skill. So there, I think, let me be very honest, like I can quickly judge people like, how can you not welcome us? We're alone. We don't know anybody. I can do that, right? But then there's like the little bit more mature version of myself, which says, hey, why would they know? They've never had to do this before. So of course they're not going to do that, right? So I think the advice I always give people is the SML strategy. S is for like short term. You find the people who are kind of in a similar situation to you, and you gravitate to them because they're the ones who make the fastest, connection. So if maybe you're in a new community and people are culturally similar to you when you go to that cultural center, maybe that's the only thing you have in common, right? You might live very different lives, have very different experiences, but then you go there because at least there's a quick connection. Then the other thing is the medium term, which would be, what do you love to do? Like, do you like photography? Do you like yoga? I mean, I've gone to yoga in French. You can go to yoga in Japanese. Like, even if you don't understand it, do something that you love, and then you'll find people who have a shared interest. That's the medium term. It takes longer, but you'll do it. And then the L is the long-term strategy, is really don't give up, to be patient. And Switzerland is a very difficult place to make relationships. And I think in some cities in the US, the larger the city, the harder it can be to make connections, because people are moving very fast, and the way cities are built can feel very isolating. At the same time, if you go to a small town in the US, the communities are very tight woven and have decades of history together and aren't looking for outsiders to join their community, right? So either way, it can be challenging. And there, I would say you have to have patience in the long term. And this is perhaps my best tip. What you can do is you can actually invite the community to you, and you offer them something they don't have. Right? So for example, let's say you know how to, I don't know, bake a specialty bread from your area, or you know how to create something culturally that they've never seen before. You could say, hey, I'm doing a workshop on this thing, right? Or you can give a talk or something where you are in control and you have expertise, right? And then you share it with them. That's a way to sort of create connection, and the power dynamic is shifted because you're the one who has expertise, right? You're not the newcomer who doesn't even know how to like find a parking spot, where's the pay area, right? So it's a little trick, and I do that. For example, if I've had to move suddenly because there was a terrorist attack in Burkina Faso, and we came to Switzerland quickly after. I didn't know anybody. It was mid-semester. And I just said, hey, I'm having girls' night at my apartment. You're girls. I'm new. Come over for some cheese and wine, right? So I felt safer hosting something than being like the one newcomer with all the people who already knew each other. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
But you know what? It might flop. It might, nobody will come, it might not work out, but you can't give up. You actually don't have a choice, right? Like if you're there long term, if you're in there your goal is to be embedded in the community, you'll find a way to charm them eventually.
That's beautiful. Yes.
You stick around long enough. You show who you are enough, and then people will realize you're not going anywhere. Actually, you're kind of cool, and maybe I'll let you into my life,
Yeah, you have a beautiful presence, and you're cool, so why wouldn't they like you, right?
And it's like, come and get this. If you have amazing banana bread, like,
right.
want this amazing banana bread, right? It's the same thing. But you do have to be patient. And the other thing I just want to say, because I come from a very homogenous community, I didn't grow up globally, we're relatively sheltered. I get it if people aren't globally minded, like people feel awkward. They don't know how, they ask questions that might not be, they might even be microaggressions, like, you don't know what people are going to ask. And we have to understand, this is maybe another thing from an intercultural perspective, we're all on a journey. And if you've picked up your life and moved somewhere else, you have experienced things maybe they haven't. Mm-hmm. So your worldview might be, I don't want to say good or bad, but it might be more globally expanded than theirs. So we have to give them a little grace that they haven't walked the same journey as you. So they're not going to be where you are.
That's the hardest, isn't it? Don't they understand? But it's true. I mean, how can you know something without walking on someone's shoes, right? And I love how you said, we need to be patient. And if just because something didn't work once, it doesn't mean we have to give up. We have to keep trying. And I also heard you, we have to develop skills of a leader, right? Because if I'm gonna bring you to my experience, I can't just be shy and waiting for someone to invite me. I have to be able to invite others and bring them to my experience, because yes, I am in the country of my host, or I call America my adopted home. I love America, but she adopted me, kind of thing. Yeah. So there's so many beautiful things that I am learning, and I have grown, and that's big, and you experience that through people, right? But also I have something to give, right? So if I don't bring it out, nobody's gonna come and see it inside my house. So I love how you said to find commonality. Like if you and I just, start listing what common thing we can find to talk about other than what we're talking about, I'm sure there will be a lot of things that we can find. So no matter how different we are, we can always find something. And I, while you were talking, you're a girl, me a girl. Okay, let's just get together, come to my party. That's one thing, but there are also different things in our life that can connect us to people who are going through that, right? Earlier, you touched on it in the beginning. Let's talk about mental health and resilience. What are common emotional challenges during big moves, and how can we build resilience? And you once said, I quote, change, I will do it once I feel stronger, to I will get stronger because I'm doing it. I would love to hear how that mindset can help folks navigate cultural stress or isolation.
I think that's something that I learned maybe with age or experience, maybe it's both, but holding the heart is the growth, right? And I remember having a conversation with one of my clients where we talked about the difference between learning and growth. And learning is where you have a choice. You're like, I'm going to go to this class and learn this thing. You have control. Growth is where it's almost like it chose you. You didn't choose it. And it's uncomfortable and you don't have control, right? So I think it's holding the heart, right? And I think the younger version of me was like, if you just have the right strategies, you can avoid the heart, right? A little bit of, self-help, holier than thou, sort of naivete as a young 20-year-old or whatever. And then as I got older, I realized it's hard because it's hard. And then I need like the Olympic level strategies to meet the level of heart, And I think when it comes to mental health and resilience, I think we give ourselves permission to struggle. I think we have to understand if you were comfortable, you're probably not doing anything big. You know what I mean? And if it's hard, it's because it's hard. So it's like, okay, it's hard. And then think, okay, this is hard. What choices do I have? And I think this is where coping strategies come in. Like, I could ignore it. I could drink myself into a stupor. I could eat my feelings. I could take it out on my kids. I could go for a run. I could journal. do you know what I mean? Like, you have a huge suite of choices. And let's say you want to go to an unhealthy choice. Then maybe you grab someone's wrist and say, hey, I need you to know right now this is hard. And here are the things I'm thinking about. Like, these are the choices I'm wanting to make, or I've noticed the last 5 weeks I've been making these choices and they're not good. Can you help me maybe reverse some of those negative choices and do something different? Like, will you meet me tomorrow at 7 for a walk? Because otherwise I'm gonna sleep in till 3 p.m, or whatever it is, right? And I don't want to prescribe strategies because I think it depends on who you are and what you're going through. But I would always come back to the basics, like we said before. Sleep, food, consumption of whatever substance, whether it's Netflix, alcohol, doom scrolling, whatever, is it healthy or not? Is it nurturing or not? And then reach out to someone and say, hey, here's what I want to do instead.
I love that. I really love that wiser self.
I got all kinds of selves.
Telling you it's hard because sometimes I notice it's in the resistance that we get, trapped. Like, no, it's not. I can do this. But there's wisdom in admitting when it's hard, and it kind of opens a lot of doors. That's what I hear you say, and I love how. And then the coping mechanism or strategies will open up depending on who you are. I love that. And let's talk about growth and contribution. So how can expats and immigrants turn their life transitions into growth and meaningful contribution?
So good. It actually makes me think of something that I read recently about contributions. If I think about the US, there's a disproportionate amount of immigrants who've won Nobel Prizes because they have seen things differently, right? They have a blind spot. They've looked at something in a new way, fresh perspective. And I think people, wherever you've immigrated to, like, your difference is actually your superpower, because you have blind spots. And I know personally with myself, there was a while where I was looking for work in Switzerland years ago, and I kept applying for jobs as if, how should I say this? I was trying to get a job that would be okay with my German, right? Like that would fit my German. And I kept getting rejected. And then when I started applying for jobs where my English was an asset and my difference was an asset, I started getting invited. So I remember there was a point where I'm like, me just trying to be someone I'm not, trying to be as Swiss as I can be and hiding my international side isn't actually bringing me anywhere. Bringing out how I'm different is the thing that adds value. Right? So I think people need to think about that. Like when you're trying to contribute to a community, to a culture, to whatever, think about what is the thing that you see that other people are missing. So that's a contribution, right? And then in terms of that would be your growth and your contribution to your community, to the culture, to the organization, to whatever, right? Because diversity actually creates higher performance if it's managed well. And then personally, I think it's really a journey about understanding what are your core values and how have you learned as you grew up to expect those values to be lived? How might they be lived differently in this case, but you can still look for the values, right? So that you can feel home in you and you can feel home in your community, right? So that would be one thing. And then I would pick out a practice, like a growth practice, whether it's journaling, whether it's listening to a podcast, whether it's being in your spiritual space, I don't know, whatever works for you, in a place where you have could be meditation, therapy, I don't know, like where you have a container where you can explore what's shifting inside. I've had things shift inside where I didn't like them. And I've said, wait a minute, I'm losing something good. I want that back, right? And I had growth inside where I'm like, I am really proud how that's shifting and that's going in a good place, right? So I think we do need to create a little bit extra space when you're in that experience, in a third culture, a new space for the growth. We're like feeding our kids and like trying to pay the bills for good reasons, right? We have a lot of really critical things we have to do. But what if one evening, instead of scrolling on Instagram, we said, no, I'm actually going to journal for 10 minutes. Or instead of talking to a friend about whatever, catching up on their kids' program, say, hey, can we talk about what we're noticing, how we're changing, right? Making it a priority. Don't add a task, but switch out a lower value task for that as a priority.
Love that, San. I really love that answer. And it hit me because in so many levels we had to go through different changes. And, sometimes when you don't have time, yes, things will change you, but not your core value, right? And you have to be able to keep who you are within yourself, even though it's evolving all the time who we are. I'm sure that you are such a big contribution to your organization that you're working at. How does it feel going back to the corporate world?
It has been an identity shift for me. I do still do a little bit of coaching on the side. I miss podcasting. For me, I felt like I had given a lot for individual transformation and transition. I was hungry to do something on a larger scale, not a more important scale, just a different scope, right? So I needed to grow and I was hungry to do something new, right? So that was exciting. What I like about it is, in my full-time company context, I showed who I was and I invited people in. But in this context, I'm hired to do something and the people don't get to choose to work with me. So I have a wide range. I have people who I have a huge scope of people, whether they want to do it or not. I have to find out, like, how do I motivate people? How do we move in the same direction? You know, so I'm being challenged. I really like that. But I notice my heart is so deeply connected to personal transformation and everybody's, you know, individual transitions, that I still do, you know, a small amount of coaching on the side to keep, you know, my heart beating in that sort of way that I really love.
And Sunday, I mean, if I worked with you, I would love it for sure. Because I absolutely love this conversation. And I remember having really a blast last time as well. So you were really a joy to be around. It's not just, you know, a personality you fake. It's a testimony of the work that you do constantly on yourself. And I know a lot of people don't understand what it takes to keep your heart pure. And, you know, even when you feel like, especially when you have kids. And I'm not sure how that feels like when you with teenagers, but I hear there's a lot of transition that's, you know, that goes on. Really amazing. How is your German?
My German is ziemlich gut.
I heard that my husband lived in Austria for 2 years, and he always tells me that it's a very hard language to master. So how is that?
No, to be honest, it's really hard, and I have to be very clear. Like, I worked very hard. I understand Swiss German, and I can speak in German. I went through all of the certifications and things, but I constantly still make mistakes. And to be very honest, when I work in German, let me just be honest, I feel kind of like an ass, because I am so smarter and funnier and more competent in English, you know? Like, I hope people can see through difference, but I do my best. Recently I had a little battle with myself, and my husband called me out on it, and I said, I'm mad because I don't speak German like a Swiss, and I'm not good enough like a Swiss. And he goes, Sunday, you weren't born and raised here. Why would that even be a goal? Like, why are you putting yourself under so much pressure? And he said, can't you just accept that you speak really good German for someone who learned it as an adult? And I had to realize I was being hard on myself.
Yeah. It's hard learning a language, let alone German. I can't even, you know, to learn how to say hello and goodbye in different languages. I have not even like touched German because I'm like intimidated by it. It sounds really tough. And I can relate because English is not my first language. And I can relate when you said, oh, but I'm funnier, I'm this, I'm that. I cannot bring all parts of me into the new language so that it can shine. I'm doing better each year. But I always say, I think there was a time that I was interviewed about learning a language, and I'm like, I'm never going to say I'm perfect until I'm able to bring all those parts of me effortlessly. So we're learning all the time.
I have to be okay with that, right?
Yeah, we're lifetime learners, and just keep learning and growing, and wherever we are is okay. I have to be okay with it, because you have other languages in there also that you're trying to manage.
And I put my youngest son has agreed to correct me on my accent, because I don't always get the umlaut, like the 2 double points over the vowel. I don't always get those right. So he's helping me correct it. After so many years of speaking German and maybe saying it incorrectly, he's gently helping me do it better. So little by little.
Well, at least he's gentle. Yes. My kids are not as gentle. They're little and they're like, Mommy, you're saying you're wrong. I'm like, okay, there are different ways of saying things, you know? So I love that. And I'm sure it was easier for your kids because when they're younger. And I'm sure one day we'll talk about language, because that's my favorite topics to talk about, and then kids. And so final insight that you may have, what do you believe expat and immigrants uniquely bring to American culture? You touched it on earlier, but I just wanted to give you a final.
I think it's a gorgeous opportunity to be disruptive in a positive sense, right? If I'm in my comfort zone and someone comes with a different life experience, they do things that I don't expect, right? And then it gives me a chance to learn. It gives me a chance to grow. And it's the same thing, right? If I'm received in a way of, oh, wait, we're more similar than we thought, right? Or, oh, that's different. Why is that? I think it's a gorgeous opportunity. The narrative of the US and the history of the US is very contentious. We don't need to get in the details there. People who are following understand, right? And there is a part of that narrative that is beautiful of if we bring our differences and allow us to sort of hold them and find creative ways to keep who we are and adapt to our situation. It's not one or the other. Even something better will come up, right? I really believe in that. And culture has always been stable and changing, right? There are things that stay there and there are things that changing. And so if we can hold that, like, what am I going to stay true to myself about and what am I going to be open to adapting? I mean, the other thing I think about is, at least my journey is, there were times in my life where I saw it as a burden, like, oh, if I didn't this, and I miss my parents and I could have seen them more often, and that kind of narrative. And I realized, hey, on this planet, I have had some mobility, right? That is a privilege. Some people don't have the luxury of mobility. Some people's mobility is forced, and that's a different context, right? But given the fact that I am thrown into a new context, whether it's something I would have chosen or not, what am I gonna do to make the most of it? So I don't know, I think from like a larger global perspective, we have an opportunity to take space, right? We also have an opportunity to shape a space. And I think that's pretty beautiful. Like, we're all ambassadors of where we came from. And we have an opportunity to communicate what's great about what you bring to the table. And I hope that has some impact, right? I always say you can't hate who you love, and people who come from more isolated areas have ideas about people and how they think or whatever. But then when you meet someone from that unknown space, you're like, oh, I actually really adore them. And suddenly your bias goes away.
Oh my God, you have given me a lot to process for myself, also individually, let alone for others. But I am going to reflect on everything that we talked about. Is there anything that I have not asked and you want to?
I mean, I think if I put myself in the situation of an immigration, like, this is my naturalized home now, whether I wanted it or not, right? Tap into your own power. And I have to remind myself of this. I can go into victim mode too, right? But like, okay, what am I going to create in my life? How will I shape this? Even if it's only within my closed doors, right? Like, our home is going to be our space the way we want it to go. And I have to adapt in ways that maybe aren't awesome when I leave the door, but I'm going to come back to my safe space. Where is the power? What can I shape, or do I have control? And if people stay in that place of agency, then I think the experience can be richer.
Beautiful. Life is hard in general, and migration or being in that kind of environment is hard, but we can make it richer. I love it. Sundae, where do people can find you these days?
Okay, well, I mean, I think the easiest place to go is sundaybean.com. That's my website. I would invite people to go to my quiz. It's which phase of transformation are you in? Really easy, fast, playful quiz. But what follows is advice based on exactly where you are in podcasts. So if you're in that form of transition, where you're like, I don't know what the heck's going on, you'll get that. If you're in the dreaming phase of what it could be, you'll get that. So that would be the best way to get a hold of me, I think.
I love it. Okay, I have taken it. It's so beautifully done.
You should take it again to see you're in a different
Yes. If I have changed, how much have I changed? Which transition am I on? So I love that, Sundae. I really thank you. I can't thank you enough, actually, for taking the time from your very busy schedule, away from your family, your kids. I know how hard that is. Thank you for being a contribution to my community, and for discussing such a complex topic and making it so easy to understand, and for giving us a lot of nuggets to take with us, and also, making it fun and joyous. We can still laugh and have fun as well. Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
I would also say thank you for the work that you do shaping a community. I would love, wherever you end up posting this in whatever forms it takes, I'd love to hear from people, what resonated, what didn't. Like, let's keep the conversation going with your community, because I have a hunch I'll learn way more from them than they can learn from me. So thank you for the opportunity to be here and be part of that.
You're very welcome. And I know this will not be the last time we talk. Oh my God. What a powerful and thoughtful conversation. Wouldn't you agree? I want to extend my deepest thanks to Sundae Bean for sharing her insight, wisdom, and warmth with us today. If you found value in this episode, please share it with a friend, leave a review. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. You can find more of Sunday's work at her website that is on the link below, and tune in to her podcast In Transit. She has a lot of wisdom there. Remember, no matter where you are in the world or what chapter you are in, your story matters. And your experience have the power to shape and inspire community. Thank you for being with us. Until next time, stay grounded, stay open, and keep building bridges.